Okay, I should be back now. Now I have to go spread this link around to a bunch of people. If you are watching this one first, just know that there was a previous live stream that I just did. So if you want to see the beginning of this live stream, you should go over to the previous live stream that is saved. This is the beginning of the second part of the live stream, just picking it back up after my internet connection was all messed up. Looks like my internet connection is way better now, so this was definitely worth it. Let me go take a look at this. I need to spread the new link around so that people know. But yeah, just continuing the old stream. All right, spreading the new link. Yeah, the internet looks like it's working a lot better. Let's hope that it lasts. All right, there we go. Yeah, I talked about Rojava in the previous stream iteration there. Give it a little bit of time, or a few minutes. Yeah, addressed it pretty extensively as my opinions about what's going on there. But I also should not pretend that I am like watching current events like a hawk. That is, in a general sense, just not me. I keep up to date, but I'm not like keeping track of all the nitty gritty. So I don't know what's like been happening in the last few days or anything, but kind of just looking at the larger narrative arc of what took place with Rojava in the previous stream there, if you want to go back and hear what I was saying about it. Yeah, I think we're back, and the stream does seem to be going a lot better right now. This looks a lot nicer insofar as I'm looking at the stream preview that I get to see. It says it's in excellent quality, phenomenal, fantastic. No, not sick, feeling pretty good. Oh, I sound a bit cold. It's probably because my voice is lower because I am staying on diet and I'm on keto, and keto makes your testosterone go up, so my voice is lower. But yeah. Let's see here. I'm going to go, let's see, what are the questions I list here? Long Defiant says, in your experience, is it better to train people into being self-aware anarchists or just move forward, take action together, and implement horizontal governance form as a culture? The latter. If you can convince people to be self-aware anarchists, that's great, but it doesn't matter if they call themselves anarchists. It's better to just convince them to hold the ideas and to build the social structures which encourage those ideas and the interpersonal structures. Just changing people's positions to a more horizontal approach is good regardless of whether they agree to anarchism precisely. It's not super important they call themselves anarchists. Instead, more important that they agree to a broadly like libertarian socialist vision, even if they don't call it that. Let's see. Asquare says, how would anarchists in the midst of a revolution interact with other states? For example, in terms of trade for necessary goods. I kind of laid that out in my video after the revolution. My conception is that you're essentially going to have all of the necessities within society. Those need to be provided kind of in a decommodified sense. Those just go directly to the people who need them. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. But the stuff that's like luxuries, you're probably going to end up kind of trading that on a world market. And those things are going to end up being commodified. So there'll probably be a lot of people that are in this sort of workers' cooperative market who are producing luxuries, that go both to the people in the society, but also will probably be traded with external entities. That's my perception, at least. SNS says, Anark, communizers don't believe in prefiguration. I talked to an insurrectionary anarchist about it. I don't understand how you can overthrow capitalism without any prefiguration. I didn't know that. I guess if that's the case, once again, I'm not pretending I know anything about communization theory. I'm just, this is what people have told me. I'm just learning from like secondary, from other people who are learning. So I don't know actually, but I would say zero prefiguration, completely infeasible, not real. Can't work, has never worked. It's just, that would just be a form of insurrection. I don't know why they would even call it communization theory. They're not going to be building any communes. They're basically just need to arm up and do a coup if that's the case. Yeah, Victorious says that's how you get a coup followed by a coup without secondary systems in place. Exactly. Let's see here. Danny says, can you do more interviews with other anarchists like Aaron for Re-Education, Kevin Carson, Margaret Killjoy? So I'll say this. When I made this channel with kind of a specific focus in mind. I said to myself, this is what I want to do. I'm not going to stray from this path. I'm very committed to it. And that was like, write educational material, meet people where they're at, but also write dense theory when I can, and see if I can make that so entertaining that people will consume dense theory. And that's what all the video essays were. And so I've already pivoted just a little bit from that. I don't only make video essays anymore. But yeah, so now I've been reconsidering what is the breadth of the channel. That's why you see me doing philosophy as well as political theory these days. Also a little bit of praxis with I've been doing praxis the whole time, but a little more emphasis on real world praxis, like with Cooperation Tulsa video. But I have been thinking maybe I need to expand the scope a little bit. I just am always afraid that I'm going to lose the spirit of the channel if I expand the scope too much. I don't want to lose the flavor and the aesthetic of the channel so that it just kind of becomes like an anarchist variety show. I don't know if that makes sense. But I'm also happy, or not happy, but willing to change that scope if the people who are viewing the channel would be happy for me to change the scope. So I'm open to doing more interviews. I did do the interview with Eric King. I've definitely done talks where I speak with other people, but I don't want to end up in a situation where my content is just becoming interviews. And I certainly don't consider myself a good interviewer. I'm certainly not. I want to have a conversation. I don't want to just sit there and kind of listen to the other person talk. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of selfish, but I want to talk back and forth with them. I want to explore their ideas with them. I want to challenge their ideas and I want to learn. So maybe that's kind of the approach I could take. With Aaron, me and Aaron agree on almost everything. So that's not going to be a huge problem. I've talked with Aaron in private quite a bit. Yeah, that's, I guess, yeah, I'd consider it. Somebody says maybe start a second channel. I don't know. It seems like second channels work out a lot better for other creators. Their second channels seem to grow a lot faster than mine does. Or I've tried to make a second channel. It was like when AI was very new, I was like, yeah, this is awesome that they can read out loud. I'm going to have them read like essays and theory, and I'm going to make audiobooks with them. Now these days, I think that people would probably frown upon that. So maybe that's why it didn't grow very fast, but the channel took a lot of work to make it grow just a little bit, Somebody says second channel is when after 500,000 subs. I'm kind of on that. That's kind of what I'm thinking, like the channel is only now almost at 40K. I doubt I can just get a bunch of people onto a new channel. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Let's see here. Chi Castanongo says, if there are no laws, only social norms, how does community handle a crime of passion or a serial offender without reverting to a localized, potentially more arbitrary form of a prison or police system? So when I say social norms, I don't mean there's no repercussions. Like there might be repercussions. But I think the point here is that we would have a restorative or rehabilitative justice system. That is to say that step number one is going to be trying to figure out the particular contexts of what took place here. And then there are two main goals. One, repair the damage that has been done. And two, prevent future damage from taking place. And that should be the focus of a rehabilitative or restorative process. And so when when I'm thinking about what that would look like, it's going to look at the context of the person. It's going to have the person trying to do reconciliation with any victims that occurred, trying to repair that from for whatever damage was done, and then trying to give that person whatever resources are needed to make sure that person doesn't do that thing again. So I think that for me is the main focus. And so, what I've heard about the Zapatista justice system seems like a good approach. Got a donation from Rex Cars a Lot for $5. How do you avoid becoming hysterical about the news? This administration is doing so many horrible things so quickly that I can't keep up. Yeah, I don't think I ever feel hysterical. But it's not as if I am not disturbed and, terrified by what's taking place here. What's taking place absolutely is intensely damaging, is horrifying, is not just the rise of fascism, but is now fascism in place, right? But I also have realized over the course of my life that dwelling in fear pretty much gets you nothing. You should only dwell in fear long enough to prepare yourself for what is coming. Once you've prepared yourself as much as you think is appropriate, you need to move forward. And you need to move forward without your fear distorting your actions. And so I guess I'm saying, bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is moving forward even while you are experiencing fear. It's about being able to push yourself through the sensation or the emotion of fear and terror. And I think that we all have to learn how to do that in order to move forward in this world, because this is a terrifying world and it's going to require us to practice a lot of bravery. The other day I was watching a TikTok and an Instagram reel is probably also a TikTok, to be honest. The guy actually had a really interesting thesis. What he said was, okay, so, bear with me here, but nobody has ever betrayed their values and nobody has ever self-sabotaged. And, that's a pretty controversial claim, right? But what he said was, you're not actually betraying your values when you make decisions that you think are bad decisions or quote unquote self-destructive decisions. He says what you're really doing is you're valuing other values more highly than the one you profess to hold most highly. So, when a person, for example, should be acting bravely, they say, I hold bravery as a very high value, but then they don't go do the thing that would be brave. They don't go and, confront the risk of the situation. Somebody might say, oh, they violated their values. No, what they're really doing is following the value of comfort or safety. So they valued safety more than bravery. And honestly, the more I think about it, I think he's absolutely onto something. I think he's absolutely right. And he says that what people are really doing is following what he calls shadow values. So he's kind of relating it to Jung's theory of the shadow. And he's saying a bunch of people just have uninspected values that they actually hold more highly than the values they say they do. And they have to introspect to discover what those values are that they are actually holding more highly than what they think are the more heroic values that they should hold. And that what people really need to do is reorient their priorities when it comes to those values and to hold those better values actually higher than the other values. That, holding bravery higher than fear is the way out of that problem, or holding bravery higher than comfort or safety. That's the way out of the bind, So I don't know. I thought that was good insight. Maybe y'all can also gain something from that. SNS donated $2. They said, how can anarchist zones not rely on the nation state? Well, you can never completely eliminate that. That's literally impossible. But what you can do is you can avoid making active inroads of negotiations with the state. So that's what the Zapatistas have done, for example. They tried and then it didn't work. And instead of repeating that process and trying harder, they just dipped and said, we are an autonomous zone. We're not trying to get the approval of the state. We're not going to run politicians anymore. That's in the past. So, yeah. So I missed a bunch of stuff while responding. CC Femboy says, how would civil laws exist under anarchism and disputes between people be resolved? You should watch my video called When Consensus Fails, because it pretty much goes through all the answer to that. Chichi Castanongo says, if you don't allow MLs in your organization, does that mean you wouldn't allow Second Thought in your organization? In your video of Second Thought, you said you wanted to talk with him, which seemed friendly. Yeah, no, Second Thought would not be allowed in Cooperation Tulsa. However, that doesn't mean that I have to be his open and avowed enemy. I am in a similar organization with him in Means TV. Both me and him are on Means TV, but that's different. I don't consider that to be my political organization. Cooperation Tulsa is the political organization. Means TV is in the social movement, as far as I'm concerned. So in the social movement, you have to collaborate with just pretty much anybody who's in the space. You don't get to choose who's in the space. So no, he wouldn't be in Cooperation Tulsa, but we can indeed cooperate when in the social movement. And furthermore, even though all my criticisms I made of Second Thought, I would still be very open to talking with him. I would still be very open to just having a conversation. Vlad says, okay, I missed the first part. Okay, building on what Chi-Chi said, I've never heard of MLs banning anarchists in their organizations, only the other way around. If most MLs allow anarchists in their organization despite fundamental disagreements, why can't anarchists do the same thing with MLs? Because MLs have a history, or authoritarians of all kinds have a history of trying to undermine the horizontal nature of the groups that they join. Anarchists are often really well-intentioned people that want to understand other people's perspectives, and they want to be very charitable to others. And so they're often very patient with authoritarian leftists, and they treat them like allies. But in response, authoritarian leftists are always trying to get anarchists to just become MLs. And they are, if anarchists go into Marxist-Leninist organizations, they're trying to get anarchists to become MLs. And if MLs join anarchist organizations, they try to get them to become hierarchical. They can't just function under a horizontal structure. It doesn't seem like nearly as often that they come into one of these organizations and they act as charitable and open-minded. Instead, it seems like they're always trying to co-opt those organizations, or they're trying to hierarchicalize those organizations. And, I think that the revolutionaries of the late 1800s and the early 1900s, before, say, the Spanish Civil War and the Kronstadt Rebellion, I think that most anarchists and libertarian socialists were much more open to these coalitions with authoritarian leftists. And it backfired enormously. And anarchists had to learn from the mistakes of collaborating with authoritarian leftists and the damage that it did when authoritarian leftists were let into the same political organizations as anarchists, and how that they always tried to manipulate and co-opt the movement. And so this is where you get the response to this called platformism. So Nestor Makhno, after the results in Ukraine, after the Bolsheviks betrayed, invaded, and then essentially colonized Ukraine, then Nestor Makhno left Ukraine after the end of all of that. He went to France, and I believe while he was there, he began writing or developing the foundations of platformism. And then from there, you get a development called Speciesismo, and that is where I am. So just to give you an idea of my ideological genealogy, you might say. My ideology is essentially as the result of witnessing the failures of anarchists trying to collaborate with authoritarian leftists. So that is simply not something that I think is acceptable or good. It's definitely a bad move. So Speciesismo gives us a way to square the two needs. One, authoritarian leftists absolutely just will be in the social movement, but we can't just be going into every space being like, ban the MLs, get rid of the, can't, and it's not good, and it's wrecker behavior, to be honest. So instead, what you have to do is you have to go into that space and you have to simply be an asset. Be an asset, and if authoritarian leftists try to co-opt things, then you point out to people the behavior that they're doing. But you don't split coalitions within the social movement based on that history. You instead just make people aware of the damages that authoritarian leftists have done in the past, and you don't let authoritarian leftists into your organizations because that's like letting the fox into the hen house. Like, it's just a bad idea, and they will try to cannibalize and destroy that organization. They will either try to turn it into a feeder group, which feeds into their vanguard. They will try to undermine the organization. There'll be a wrecker, or they will try to take control and co-opt the organization. There are very few examples to the contrary, because that is what authoritarian leftism leads to. Those are its methods. If you're a hierarchical organization, you're trying to get everybody to follow your command. And so if people fall in line, you're happy to hear it. In a horizontal organization, you have to build coalitions of solidarity rather than coalitions of domination. So that means that letting dominators into your coalitions undermines your coalition of solidarity. So you have to build coherent or theoretically unified libertarian, socialist, or anarchist organizations which do not have authoritarian leftists in them, so that authoritarian leftists cannot try to turn them into a feeder group, wreck them, or take control of them. And in the social movement, you build robust movements that the authoritarian left has a difficulty co-opting, turning into feeder groups, or wrecking. And so I hope that's the answer to your question. If you want to learn more about this, you should go read Social Anarchism and Organization by Farge. Perpicino says, what exactly is the difference between anarcho-communism and libertarian Marxism? So like council communism and autonomism. The answer is not very much. The best collaboration, some of the best collaborations I've had have been with people who have a very libertarian Marxism. They can be very good allies, and, there are examples of libertarian Marxists being principled until the last. And so I do not consider all Marxists to be authoritarian leftists. I want to be very clear here. Just Marxism doesn't mean you're an authoritarian, but everything that comes after Marxist-Leninism, that's all authoritarianism. And it's basically the counter-revolutionary wing of Marxism. So anything that derives from Marxist-Leninism, Stalinism, Maoism, with maybe like one or two exceptions, those are all ideologies of counter-revolution, of co-optation, of wrecking and turning groups into feeder groups. That's what those ideologies are all about. Perpicino says, the weird thing is I've heard people describe the Vanguard as simply being a group that guides and educates the masses rather than a party dictatorship. So ideally that would be what it is. But in practice, it's always a sort of aspiring dictatorship. So like the Vanguard, the actual description of that is like the specifically anarchist organization, the Catalyst Group on the libertarian left. That's the actual example of the group that guides and educates the masses. The Vanguard is basically prefiguring dictatorship. So within the Vanguard, they're using democratic centralism, which is really just a buzzword for internal party dictatorship. You have essentially the people that are in the democratic centralist decision-making body, which sit around and have discussions, but then the people that are representatives that have been voted to become representatives, those people make all of the ultimate decisions. So yeah, democratic centralism is essentially prefiguring something like the Politburo in the USSR, which was also a dictatorial body over the masses of workers. So yeah, vanguardists say stuff like that, but in practice, that is hardly ever the case. I'd say of all examples I've ever seen, it was maybe 1% of all examples I've ever seen. And that was an example where it was clear to me they didn't actually understand what democratic centralism was. And instead they were just doing kind of a form of direct democracy, which they called democratic centralism. So yeah, I mean, what authoritarian leftists say they're doing and what they say they want and what they say they have done, it just completely mismatches the reality of what they actually do, what they actually seem to want as revealed preference, and what they have actually done in history. It's just like there's a lot of deception around the authoritarian left, a huge amount of deception. Yeah, SNS donated $2. They said ML creators ruined the coalition with anarchist TikTokers. Absolutely. That was bound to happen. This is what I mean, okay? So like, oh, there you go. You build this coalition. You think, oh, yeah, we're all, a united front and so on. Yeah, until you frustrate them, until you criticize anything they do, until you are critical of their authoritarian regimes that they like, until you're critical of campism, until you hold any sorts of principles, then they're going to smear you up and down the street. They're going to insult you. They're constantly talking. Like, imagine being an anarchist in an ML space, and they're just constantly shitting on you, constantly shitting on anarchists in general, and they're like, oh, you're one of the good ones, I don't know, that just seems humiliating. How's that not humiliating? That sounds super humiliating to me. I would never do that. That's fucked up. The truth is that anarchists and libertarian socialists need to be calling out authoritarian leftists for the way they are. We need to be making it to where our spaces are hostile to their methods of co-optation and feeder groups and wrecking. And basically make it to where everybody is on the lookout for those behaviors, that the default understanding when an authoritarian leftist comes into a space is, oh, are they trying to turn me into a feeder group for their vanguard? Oh, are they trying to take over this group and hierarchicalize it? Or, oh, are they trying to wreck us because we're not a hierarchical group that does what they want? That should be our default perception of authoritarian leftists when they come into our space. If somebody says they're a Marxist-Leninist, if somebody says they're a Maoist, if somebody says they like Stalin, we should immediately be skeptical of those places in organizing spaces. We should immediately be skeptical of those people in any of our leftist spaces online. Those people almost certainly are there to do some form of damage or to try to manipulate and take control of the situation. And I'm sure there are plenty of individuals that defy what I'm saying, okay? If you're like, oh, well, I know XYZ and they're fine, or, oh, this group in my town is fine. Sure, maybe that's the case. Okay, I don't know. I'd have to know all your details, and I don't. But like, very rarely is that the case. Okay? Their whole method is about convincing you that they want what you want. Okay? Let's see. There was this quote. Let me see if I can dig it up real quick. I have to open the program real quick. Let's see here and here. The Maoist method of recruiting uses a similar tactic. The person who the Maoist is trying to recruit is asked to recite their beliefs and then persuaded that working toward the objectives of the Maoist Communist Party will fulfill that person's beliefs and desires. The objective is to persuade you to do more and more until you are actually following the Maoist leaders at the expense of your original values, desires, work projects, etc. Once they get you into their movement, they begin the process of trying to re-educate you by challenging your beliefs until you think like they do. It's a kind of brainwashing similar to that used by some religious cults. This is from a pamphlet called The Chinese Anarchist Movement by Robert Scalpino and George Yu. So this is just actually about the Chinese anarchist movement. But at the very end, they're making some comments, and this is one of their comments. And this is precisely 1000% exactly what I have witnessed. They start by convincing you that they already agree with you. They're lying. They don't. And then they convince you that their Vanguard party is secretly doing everything that you already want to do. Oh, you want, anything you say. Oh, I want a democracy. Oh, yeah, exactly. Vanguardism is so democratic, and the USSR was very democratic. Like, if you, I want worker control. Oh, yes, we also want worker control. But, like, if you peel away the mask, you find that those are euphemisms. They don't really believe in those things. What they believe is party dictatorship, rule of a very narrow group of bureaucratic administrators, and a coalition with the national bourgeois. So after the revolution is done, they're going to collaborate with the bourgeois. Whatever bourgeois or local or national to that region, the vanguardists will collaborate with them in order to build out more capitalism. This is what we see in reality. They don't actually believe in the things that are said in their texts. They don't actually hold to the values of their vanguards. Their vanguards are just instruments to cannibalize the social movement, to make it useful to a small group of people that consider themselves the enlightened portion of the proletariat, when in fact they are co-opters and deceivers and manipulators. And it's not their fault, it's their ideology. Their ideology leads them to the action of being wreckers and forming things into feeder groups and manipulating the social movement. It's their default. And if they don't, that's great. I love when it's not the case. For example, the Black Panthers, that wasn't the case with the Black Panthers. And notice, you can almost always pick out if somebody's like, oh, we're a Marxist-Leninist group, but they're doing prefiguration, if they're building dual power, you'll notice those are the ones that don't quite work the same. Those are the ones where you're like, oh, those actually seem a little bit different. So if you find those people, I'm not saying like work with them and like have them in your organizations, but give them a little more leeway, give them a little more lenience than I'm maybe suggesting here. But if they are traditional, like a Marxist-Leninist or a Stalinist or a Maoist, and they're making excuses for what happened in China, or modern day China especially, they make excuses for Stalin's Russia, they make excuses for what the USSR did to the workers' movement. If they do any of that stuff, those people are just preparing to wreck your group. Those people are preparing to try to consume your group, to co-opt your group, or to turn it into a feeder for their dead-end vanguard. That is essentially what they're going to be doing. Those are wrecker methods that have absolutely no proven record of building a proletarian revolution. Those are a method for a national bourgeois to take control of a country. So absolutely, just I hope you take very clear notice of what I'm saying here, everybody listening. Poor Boy Soul says, is saying MLs including people who say they're just Leninists or Marxists, or is it for specifically people who say they're Marxist-Leninists? Anybody whose like praxis is inspired by Lenin and the people who came after him. You know, Lenin, most Trotskyists, any Stalinists, Maoists, by and large, if that's how they identify, those people are wreckers and are just trying to manipulate and co-opt the movement. That's their primary purpose in the movement. They're going to try to insert themselves into positions of importance so that when things go wrong, they can try to jump into the driver's seat. Or when things not when things go wrong, when things get good, when we're succeeding as a movement, they're going to try to jump into the driver's seat. They're going to claim that they're the ones who did it, just like the Bolsheviks did. And then they're going to claim that now they're the enlightened sector of the proletariat and they should lead the revolution forward. Even though most of the time, Marxist-Leninist groups have very little to do with the development of any revolutionary activity. That revolutionary activity takes place from the bottom up in the variety of structures that are built by the people and built by committed organizers who care about creating alternatives. Marxist-Leninists most often just try to jump into the driver's seat of a movement that they had almost no hand in creating. And this is especially true, by the way, of the USSR. The Bolsheviks had had almost no hand in creating the revolution in the USSR. They were a Johnny-come-lately that showed up at the last minute after the February Revolution and then tried to insert themselves as the leaders of the movement. This is their recurring historic method. Anyway, long rant because I really wanted to get the point across. I think it's very important that we get this point across right now. So yeah, I missed like a ton of comments. I'll try to go back up and see the last one. Okay, yeah, I read the $2 comment. Spider-Man says, why do you hate MLs more than any other anarchists? Have they ever done anything to you personally? No, I read history. That's what happened. Read too much history. Now I understand what the methods are, and I can see all the telltales now. And now that I saw what happened in history and I saw how it all started, I see they're just doing the same shit now. It's the same shit. The PSL is just this sort of Johnny-come-lately co-opting party, just like the Bolsheviks were. It's just a recurring process. It's like, it's not because an individual or a set of individuals are bad. It's just that the ideology, the methodology itself is a methodology of co-option and destruction. But like, yeah, they're more damaging than other anarchists for sure. I mean, listen, if you followed me on Twitter, you know I've beefed with other anarchists, so I'm not going to go back to that right now. I've beefed with individualist anarchists. I've beefed with anti-organizationalists many times. I've beefed with anarcho-nihilists many times. I wrote an entire video essay critiquing anarcho-nihilism. So I definitely will critique people within my own house that I think are doing things wrong, but I don't think that any of those are as much of a threat to the movement as authoritarian leftists are. Knowledge and Defense, you said, do you think it's impossible to view class as the primary contradiction without being reductionist? If you mean it as tackling other social issues now is productive but limited. I think that that's one of those where we'd have to talk through all the details extensively. I don't really believe in this concept of a quote unquote primary contradiction. Now, if what you mean is it is the one that animates the largest number or the largest amount of the hierarchical process, that it does the majority lifting of the hierarchical process in society, I think most people would probably agree that capitalism does the most heavy lifting of any hierarchical process in society. But I think the problem is that if you start talking in terms of primary and secondary and all that, you're going to start ranking. Once you start ranking, you're going to lose sight of the totality of the problem. Because if what you say, if what you think is things like that, then you end up in the situation where you're like, oh, we got to deal with class first, then we can deal with patriarchy, then we can deal with white supremacy. That just plainly will not work, and it has no historical example of working. So you have to deal with them all at the same time, okay? And we live under the social structures where all of them are active at the same time. So we have to be constantly pushing back on all of them. But at the same time, we have to be developing solidarity against hierarchical power structures. Because the actual primary contradiction, if you were to do a ranking, the primary contradiction is hierarchical power versus horizontal power. That is the true eternal contradiction that animates the struggle of history. And class and capitalism, that's just one hierarchy. We have to develop anti-hierarchical consciousness. And that requires us to be constantly educating people about the variety of ways that hierarchical power structures show up in our lives. And so I'm not really on board with the language of primary and secondary contradictions and all of that. Instead, I see that these are all one totalizing structure, and the total structure does the work to prop up all of the other components of the total structure. So that's my view on it. Then you said, and believe that the economic side has to be resolved first in order to fully tackle this issues without constantly funded counterpropaganda. Yes, yeah, that's what I don't agree with. I don't think there's a first and second kind of thing here. That's just not how it works. Yeah, you said the way I would put it is that we got to prefigure everything as much as possible, but the first finishing blow has got to be against class. It like we have to take whatever blows are available. You understand? Like you can undermine the class society by also undermining patriarchal structures and white supremacist structures and structures of transphobia and stuff like that. That will work to undermine the capitalist class structure. I mean, I gotta say, the intersectional revolutionary perspective has gotten a lot of validation from the rise of fascism in the United States. Anti-capitalism did not develop much teeth before Trump came. Okay, so like the old Marxist analysis of fascism is that fascism is just capitalism under threat. Okay, but here's the thing. I mean, I don't mean to shit on the movement here in America, but we have not developed much of a class movement. We have not developed much of a union movement. The unions that exist and are really powerful are old, like bourgeois unions now, right? They're more aligned with the bourgeois. And not entirely, but I think you all know exactly what I'm saying here. And so it's clearly not that capitalism really felt like it was under threat, but instead what we did get is through BLM, we got a bunch of pushback on white supremacy. And through Me Too, we got a bunch of pushback on patriarchy. And through, you know, you name it, right? The waves of anti-transphobia or, you know, like trans acceptance, you might say, and disability justice, and the list goes on. Those things began to transform the culture, and apparently that transformation and those concessions were enough to make the structure terrified enough to do fascism. I just want to point that out. Like, if your idea is that fascism is a reaction to an insurgent movement, well, the insurgent movement here in the United States was certainly not a well-organized proletarian movement. It was instead a movement that was broadly intersectional, and apparently that intersectional movement appeared as such a threat to the mega machine that it tried to crush the movement, or is in the process of trying to crush the movement. But you'll notice that, like, their focus is not very much on class rhetoric. Their focus is mostly on like anti-immigrant stuff, right? It's like deeply racist and white supremacist and anti-Semitic and all of that. They're like, I don't think that thinking of it as like class as the primary contradiction is a good way to look at the analysis. And I also don't think that looking at the metadynamics of the way that this conflict is played out in the United States really backs up the concept that fascism is quote unquote capitalism in crisis. Fascism appears instead to be the hierarchical system in crisis. And when the hierarchical system senses, or its, you know, operators sense that all of its principles, its hierarchical principles, are being undermined, and hierarchical realism is being undermined, that is also a threat. So I just want to emphasize that, like, it's not to say that this means that class is unimportant. If class is left behind, none of this shit will fucking matter, okay? Like, if all you care about is that stuff, but you also don't care about class, then you're just going to give into, like, bourgeois interests when the liberals come back and say, everybody gets civil rights again. So class has to be included, but that's the thing is like the anarchist analysis, I think, should be constantly leading us toward the recognition that it has to be all of them at once, and that there has to be attempts to deal revolutionary blows against all of these social structures simultaneously, or otherwise the revolution will be recuperated by whatever mechanism that we left behind. Oh, we didn't deal with white supremacy and we did a revolution, a class revolution. Oh, well, look at that. Now we have like white supremacy in our post-revolutionary society, and now we have splits between white and black people, and now we have, it could turn out really bad, and it has turned out really bad in history. So I just don't take this perspective of trying to think of things in the primary and secondary. I don't think it's a holistic analysis of revolution. Got another donation from CHF for $10. They said, what do you see as the unique challenge for the American left in today's age regarding ICE, Minneapolis, and the strike? Does history truly repeat itself? It can. I mean, there are aspects of history that certainly do repeat themselves, right? Obviously, I think I'm more in line with like the history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme kind of thing. What do I think is the unique challenge for the American left in today's age? I think personally, my position is that the American left's challenge is a lot like other places' challenge, and that is they have to discover a broadly anti-hierarchical revolutionary vision. I think that, if you look historically, what drove the revolutionary movements of the past, it was a form of common interest, and that common interest was around people's shared proletarian identity, right? That proletarian internationalism was an international common interest which brought the people together in masses in order to carry out transformations of society. What we need now, however, and what the failure of that was, and what we have to do instead, is we have to create a new common interest, which is an anti-hierarchical internationalism, right? We have to find essentially the rhetoric that can make people understand that the real fight internationally is against hierarchical power structures, and it must involve the proliferation of alternative horizontal power structures within the society as it exists, just in the same way that the anti-capitalist left of the past, or rather, the left that was mostly focused on anti-capitalism of the past, tried to develop the unions as a fighting body in order to fight back against the hierarchical structures, or against the capitalist structure of society as it stood. We have to do the exact same thing in building horizontal structures that fight back against the hierarchical power structures of society as it currently stands. And we have to do that in such a way that, yes, it is universalizing. And that is the point, is that it's universalizing. It is a common interest. We all have differing interactions with hierarchical power structures. We all interact with different discrete hierarchical power or interrelated hierarchical power structures, but we are all at war with hierarchical power structures. That's the common interest that has to be proliferated, not only in the United States, but across the planet in every place on Earth. So that's my current perspective. Now, I do think that, then you mentioned regarding ICE, Minneapolis, and the strike that's being done there is fantastic. They're doing a great job. I think that they are actually giving the rest of us in the United States a model for how to struggle against ICE. I think that we actually have to be considering how that people can try to mimic a lot of their, for example, signal structures and how ICE Watch is being done there. So they're actually providing an excellent example of how to do direct action there in Minneapolis. So people should definitely be keeping track. As far as the strike falls victim to the criticism I've had of many calls for a general strike. And that is that it just basically was not organized enough, right? It did not take the time to make sure that it was expansive enough to really cause, to do any damage. And I think that, it scared power structures, and that was probably good. It might be part of what's intimidating ICE right now. But it needed to be a lot more extensive than that. It needed to be more than just a call to a general strike. It needed to be the organization of a general strike, which is very different. The organization of a general strike requires, the building of coalitions, trying to expand the general strike to the maximum place that it can reach. And instead it was very localized, and it was more an informal call to a general strike. So I think that was it's good that they did it, but it only lasted for like a day. And did not amount to a whole lot. And that's not to insult them. It's just to say people need to learn from those examples, and we need to stop doing this thing where we make calls for a general strike. Stop making calls for a general strike. I'm just going to say to everybody watching this, stop making calls for a general strike. Stop saying we're going to have a general strike this year. General strikes don't happen by calling for general strikes, everyone. That's not how a general strike happens. You don't say, hey, everybody, it's time to do a general strike. And then everybody goes, I think it's about time to do a general strike. And, you don't do a general strike by being like, we have put out an official call for a general strike. That's not how it works. That's just not how it works. Okay? You do a general strike by building unions and confederating unions together and building strike funds beforehand and building out systems of mutual aid beforehand and getting all the unions to talk with each other in calls and to coordinate all of their resources and all of that. That's what causes a general strike. You're never going to make a call for a general strike and have a general strike happen. So I just want to say it's harmful to continue making calls for general strikes that don't materialize, because then what it does is it teaches people that when there are calls for general strikes, that it's fake. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Oh yeah. Or, oh yeah, I've heard that about 12 times this year. The more times that you hear we're calling for a general strike and nothing happens, you just start to assume, oh, well, it just means there's no teeth here. There's now not going to be a general strike. And then that discourages people. And then that makes people not believe in the concept of a general strike. And then it means that people are going to think, oh, well, that's what general strikes amount to, a bunch of empty, meaningless calls. No, if you're going to, do not even think of calling for a general strike until you have numerous unions already behind you. You go to the unions and you begin organizing a general strike. Organizing general strikes is what makes general strikes happen, not calling for general strikes. So I don't mean I'm sure there's some people who are in my audience who are involved with general strike stuff or have been in the past. And I just want to this is my opinion on it, and I hope you take it to heart, because this is really important that people understand this. We cannot have people doing this over and over and over, calling for a general strike twice a year that never turns into anything. It's discouraging. It damages our capability to actually build a general strike. So if you want a general strike, stop calling for it and go organize the unions. Period. Anyway, so let's see. Riley Strong says, is there a term for being aware that hierarchical power structures are inherently exploitative and should be opposed, akin to the concept of class consciousness? In a modern anarchism, I call it horizontal consciousness, or anti-hierarchical consciousness, or anti-chiriarchal consciousness. Probably horizontal consciousness is the best one there, but those are the words that I use in my work. Sandy Turkwich said, aren't there unions associated with the push for one today? I'm not aware of the one today, but the one that happened a few days back, I'm actually not criticizing that one as much, because there actually was some coordination between the unions, but I just want to be clear that they made a call for a general strike still. Even the unions were doing that. The unions have got to organize together and do a general strike. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that this is bad that they're doing it. I'm not aware if there's one happening today. That's new to me. But yeah, I was only talking about the one that happened it was last week or something. But I also don't want to discourage people here, because I think there's a lot of energy in the left right now. We're seeing a bunch of new people come into the left. We're seeing a bunch of leftists very fired up about the issues, and that's really good. So, Freestyle Skates donated $5, and they said, should we work within the current labor unions or start creating radical militant unions? So this is actually at the foundation of the split between anarcho-syndicalism and Speciesism. Okay, so anarcho-syndicalists said what we do is we create radical militant unions. That's the anarcho-syndicalist perspective. And the best example we have is probably the C&T FAI. But what actually seems to work best in practice is going into the current labor unions and trying to counsel them towards a more radical and horizontal perspective, seeing the unions as being part of the social movement, not as necessarily being political organizations. And that this seems to be a more effective approach, because the existing unions already exist, and there's not to say don't build a radical union. That's not a bad thing. I'm certainly not discouraging you from building a radical union in your circumstances. But I think that if you already have a big union that's already over some trade, and you're in that trade, you should just join the big union, and you should try to create a tendency within that unit or within that union, which pushes that union more towards radical, horizontal, anti-hierarchical consciousness and action. So this is sort of the view of people who are part of Speciesism. Sissy Femboy says, Ansin is a bit too sectarian with regular people. Exactly. So anarcho-syndicalists are like, no, you make a radical union. That's the only thing that matters. Whereas a Speciesismo is like, no, listen, y'all, we got to dwell within the world as it is. And we have to change the structures that are already on our side. We have to make them more like, revolutionary. So yeah, so that's my perspective on that. Zahiriel says, have you ever heard of the Piraha tribe of the Amazon jungle? If not, I recommend you look them up. They have no leaders, their language has no numbers or words for colors, and have no concept of the distant future or distant past, only the present. That's interesting. And let's see here. Piraha tribe. I'll keep it open in another tab. So let's see here. Anarcho Crow says, sorry if this has been asked before, but now that modern anarchism is finished, will you return to liberation and action? Liberation and action is always on the back burner because I don't actually really enjoy writing pieces about like history or current events. Like that's not like a passion of mine. So in that sense, it's kind of like hard to force myself to do it. And that's kind of what it comes down to. So liberation and action, I don't think is going to return just because modern anarchism is over, but I've definitely been considering writing up some liberation and action scripts. So that's something that it's still probably going to happen. I have a big like Excel spreadsheet of examples for liberation and action. So I should definitely keep creating them, I think. And I've gotten plenty of requests. One thing I will say is that when I published the liberation and action videos, they didn't do well, but they have done well over a very long period of time. So like they constantly are growing. They're like evergreen content apparently. So I definitely probably should keep creating them. Sun and Smoke says, any thoughts about indigenous anarchy and its critique of Western anarchism? Yeah, I mean, most of the critiques that I've read from indigenous anarchists are critiques of the sort of economic reductionism of past anarchism. They are critiques of anarchists sort of not recognizing the importance of land and the importance of land to people. Also, sometimes they are referencing anarchism not writing enough about being anti or decolonial. But I think that those are mostly good critiques. And I hope to see those critiques no longer be true. And they seem like they're less true of modern anarchists. So I definitely think there are fewer anarchists who those critiques describe these days than perhaps there were even in like the early 1900s. But I think that indigenous anarchist theory is good precisely because it kind of preempted that change. And has a lot of wisdom, especially I think for me, where I've found like the most kind of insight is about the importance of land and environment and our connection to the ecology. Just catching up with the comments here. Somebody mentioned, let's see here. Any thoughts? No. What are your thoughts on what happened in DAANES or Rojava this past month? We're getting a whole new influx of tankies using this as an argument against anarchism. Well, I already talked about that. If you want to go watch the first stream, at the very beginning of the stream, I talk about Rojava. However, insofar as they're talking about using that as an argument against anarchism, do we need to remind them that Nicolas Maduro literally just got straight up kidnapped without any pushback whatsoever, and Venezuela got like tactically bombed in numerous places? And last time I checked, Venezuela has a state. I don't know. Sure looks to me like making a state does not protect you from imperialism. It sure looks to me like their leader literally just got kidnapped from their country without any resistance, and they're the ones talking about how you have to do it our way or you're going to get destroyed. Sorry, last time I checked, it didn't help you. Looks to me like you are very susceptible to fucking decapitation attacks, okay? They literally just kidnapped your president, okay? So probably practice some humility is what I would tell them. Flinner says, is there much of a counterculture where you're at, or is it just Fascistville? Both. No, there's a very strong counterculture in Tulsa, specifically in Oklahoma. It's part of the reason why I actually love Tulsa. You know, there's a lot wrong with Tulsa, but there's a lot of really good things about Tulsa. And we have a very strong counterculture. Our music scene is very, very strong. There's so much good music in Tulsa, and there's a lot of good people that are living here. So, yeah, no, I do not take Tulsa to be Fascistville. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of fascists around here, and Oklahoma is a very conservative in many ways, but our counterculture is strong precisely because of that. Uh-oh. Mentioning that Maduro got kidnapped made our pet authoritarian leftist angry here in chat. Sorry, just tired of the empty talking points. Don't really need to respond to that. Thoughts on U.S. potentially invading Cuba in the coming weeks? I have not heard any sort of concrete plans up till now, but, you know, maybe I've just missed the news. Like, if I haven't seen the news about it, I mean, Trump's been posturing that he's going to invade a bunch of places in the surrounding geography. So I suppose it wouldn't be new if he did so. But the problem is like, who knows if he's actually going to deliver on it or not? I mean, he could apparently just kidnap Venezuela's leader at a whim. So we're basically just like waiting to see if he delivers on all of his threats. Like Greenland, he like made a bunch of threats, but then when he saw that the economy was tanking and that Europe was developing autonomy, he backed off. I mean, who knows if he's backed off in total, but he's backed off for now from all those claims. So hard to say. We'll find out what the actual concrete of what takes place here is. Vlad, you silly goose. You've been in here enough to know that not only do I have a counter argument to that, I've written entire video essays countering that. Like, why are you repeating talking points that you know I've already responded to? Like, these are easy counter arguments. I've said all this stuff 100 times. Like, this is the weird part about authoritarian leftists. They think because they repeat things that it makes them true. It actually reminds me a lot of the authoritarian right. The authoritarian right thinks that if they just repeat things enough, it makes them true. And the authoritarian left similarly thinks that all they have to do is repeat their talking points. They have to repeat their propaganda. They have to repeat their thought-terminating cliches over and over and over. And eventually, people are just going to agree with them. The problem, bro, is if this were a new person that I'd never spoken to before, I'd take the time to just absolutely demolish that argument. And I've demolished that argument from 1,000 other people. But me and you've already been in my streams quite a few times. Why are you repeating empty propaganda in my streams? Like, you already know my responses to that. You already know how I feel about what the USSR did. Let me ask you a question. Like, America fought against the Nazis. Do we have to admire America now? Is America good now? Like, is that really all you've got? Great Britain fought the Nazis. That's it? That's all you've got? A state fought the Nazis and won, so state good. Like, God, man, what a brain dead argument. It was overwhelmingly the Soviet centralists. Shut up. It could have been any army of that size. It could have been any state of that size. There was nothing special and fancy about the Soviet army that made them the ones that did it. It was because Germany faced an opposition that was larger and more strategically unified than them. It wasn't because of the fancy magic of Marxist Leninism in the USSR. It was just dumb. You saying this makes you look stupid. You should just stop making these points. Yeah, the USA also fought the Nazis last time I checked. Great Britain also fought the Nazis last time I checked. Wow, so true. I guess now USA is good. Now USA and Great Britain good. I've just found out. It turns out pretty much everyone was fighting the Nazis. Incredible. Incredible stuff. Wow. Yeah, and I'm not even going to get into the fact that the USSR tried to ally with the Nazis first. Stalin was shocked when he was betrayed by Hitler. He's like, I don't know. I thought we were getting along pretty well. God, what a clusterfuck. Yeah, somebody said Germany was just legit insane for thinking it was going to occupy such a gigantic region. Yep, ML to MAGA pipeline is real. So Black Anarchist 1992 donated $5. He said, Black anarchists versus Black reactionary / Black traditionalists, which is ADOS, FBA, NOI, the Black Church, etc., will be even more visible in 2026. That's a good thing. I mean, it's certainly needed from what I can see. And I already see it brewing. I mean, I definitely see a lot of commentary about it. I'm seeing a lot more discussion of it in all the spaces I'm part of. And I hope to see it have some effectiveness, because I probably don't need to make any commentary here that those tendencies are very bad things. These seem like the sort of infiltration of fascist ideology into Black communities. And very, very negative. So I hope to see that succeed. Freestyle Skate says, how has anarchism grown since you have got involved, Anark? Anarchism is becoming more and more organizationalist over time. The longer I've been around, there are more and more anarchists who are recognizing the importance of organization and mass scale organization and revolutionary activity. When I first got started, there were a lot more like individualist anarchists. There were a lot of anarchists that all they cared about was their lifestyle and going to punk shows and stuff like that. And they'd call themselves anarchists, but they didn't really have any knowledge about anarchism as a theory. Lifestyleism was huge when I was younger, and lifestyleism hasn't disappeared by any means. There's certainly lots of lifestylists in the community today, but there are way more social anarchists than before. Anti-organizationalism is slowly declining in popularity. We're seeing more organizationalism come up. We're seeing a resurgence of anarcho-syndical. Rather, when I first got started, there were quite a few anarcho-syndicalists. Then they disappeared as we kind of moved through the Me Too and BLM era. And then I'm seeing more anarcho-syndicalists again now. But I'm also seeing the rise, for example, of Speciesism and Platformism, and also, but then there's, a lot of collusion of the anarchists and the communalists. So like this whole, Murray Bookchin back in like the 90s and 80s beefed with the individualist anarchists, and the individualist anarchists decided that now they wanted to snub Murray Bookchin and all of social ecology and communalism. But then like the next generation of anarchists became more like social anarchists, and they were like, nah, I mean, Bookchin's critiques seem pretty correct here. Y'all just seem like you were coping because he accurately described what y'all were doing and why it was a dead end. And so Bookchin and communalism and social ecology is being rejoined with the movement. So we're definitely seeing that return. We're seeing intersectional analysis has risen since I've been an anarchist. Intersectionality was definitely kind of like nobody would have really used that word back in, like, say, the Occupy days, or if they did, it was not a common impulse. But these days, intersectionality and anarchism are just wedded with one another. So, like, there's been a lot of improvement. There's been a lot of construction of a revolutionary alternative. Prefiguration has become very, very big, but not like a sort of like fuck off to the wilderness and build a commune sort of prefiguration, but instead like a prefiguration where you build it in the here and now and it has a combative tendency to it, and that you're trying to build the alternative power structure. Like, that has grown big time in the modern era. So. Let's see. MLs. Yeah, anarchism is purely a European thing. If you ignore the Zapatistas, Rojava, Speciesismo, Black anarchist, Japanese anarchist, Korean anarchist, yeah, the list goes on. Like, there's so much influence from outside of Europe at this point. Anarchism is a global phenomenon. In fact, its most recent big advancement was there in Brazil. That's where Speciesismo comes from. Alexander 5 said, I'm curious, how much do you follow Magic the Gathering scene? Did you see that a well-liked and great MTG player, Kai Bud? No, I don't know how to say the name, so probably not. Recently died fighting cancer. That's sad. I wasn't aware of that. I keep track. I like watch YouTube videos, and I play Commander every week, but I'm not like the most knowledgeable. Like, I know enough to be a good player and to build good decks, but I'm not like, a diehard. I haven't been around from the beginning like a lot of people. Somebody says, what is Cooperation Tulsa doing about ICE protests and the genocide? We are working alongside groups that are doing things about that. However, that stuff, I would say, it's usually not good OPSEC to talk about that kind of stuff. So I'll just leave it at that. Hyper Anamoya says, what would you say about accusations of platformism or speciesismo being vanguardist? I recall the platform section on Syndicalism defined the general anarchist organization as a liaison. I do not see platformism or speciesismo as being vanguardist. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not to say that I do not understand why the accusations are being made. What do we have here in the Catalyst group? We have essentially a very educated militant minority. The militant minority is going into social spaces, trying to build their revolutionary capabilities and to build out the revolution more broadly and to organize the revolution with itself. And a lot of people, that is what they mean by vanguardist. And there was a time a long time ago before Marxist-Leninism that is kind of what vanguardism meant. By that very, very old definition, pretty much every tendency is vanguardist. But by our current understanding, insofar as like we're talking about the modern understanding of this word vanguard, vanguardism also implies hierarchicalization, that we have a hierarchical structure. It generally involves these days a form of like democratic centralism, it's like prefiguring dictatorship. And so that's why I would say it's not vanguardist. But what it does, I would say, have in common with vanguardism is that part about an organized militant minority intervening in the social movement. And if that's all that's meant... Sorry, the cat just started knocking things over. Go on, baby. Don't knock things over. If that's all that's meant by vanguard, then like pretty much every tendency builds vanguards. If what's meant by vanguard is like, the organized, theoretically consistent militant minority, well, then an affinity group, a radical affinity group or an insurrectionary cell is a vanguard then. I don't know. It's like by the time that word would work appropriately, it would stop being a useful word. We'd have to broaden it out until it lost its meaning in the process. Murray is tired of me being on film, and he's just fucking with all my lighting and everything, all my computer peripherals and everything. Stop. Okay. Freestyle Kate says online MLs think they'll be in the Vanguard. Exactly. Knowledge and Defense says, thoughts on the idea that the culture war is one big misdirecting scapegoat for late stage capitalism, and this is what Hitler, for example, and the right wing in general have been all about. I mean, it's a tool. There's no doubt. Like the outcomes of the culture war and the way it's being used absolutely are a tool for the fascists to distract people. But I don't think that it's like we can just broadly say that, quote unquote, the culture war is just a distraction or a scapegoat. I think that it's used in such a way, it's weaponized in such a way that it's being a scapegoat, but that no, the culture war, quote unquote, if that just refers to women's rights and, being against white supremacy and like anti-racism and all of that, if that's what's meant by like the culture war, then no, it's not a distraction. It's not a scapegoat. It's very important. But I agree with you that if what you're saying is like it has been escalated to a spectacle, which has become a distraction and a way to split people among one another, especially people who maybe would have had like common interest, 100%, 1,000% agreed. But I don't think that's what almost anybody means when they say that it has been a misdirection or a scapegoat. Instead, it seems like usually that means we need to put non-class issues in the back seat. They're not that important. That's what most people mean when they're talking about that. Meet Your Multitude says, do you have an opinion on Michael Parenti in the wake of his passing? I do not like Michael Parenti. I did not like him when he was alive. I think that he was one of the preeminent spreaders of misinformation about the USSR. He was a prolific spreader of misinformation about anarchists. He was the popularizer of this Tankie idea of, quote unquote, actually existing socialism, aka state capitalism. He basically redefined socialism for a lot of people. So he made it less about actual worker control of the means of production and instead just made it about overthrowing the imperialists or overthrowing colonizers or overthrowing, American interests in your country. And that paved the way to campist nonsense geopolitics. So like Parenti gave some good speeches and I agree with some of the things that are in his speeches. Like he has some really good quotes. But Parenti was a pretty harmful figure, honestly. He was a very harmful figure on the left. I'm sure he brought a bunch of people in good faith to leftism, but he also misinformed an enormous number of people. He was a prolific spreader of misinformation. Freestyle Skate says, do you recommend anarchists to create content on sites like YouTube or have advice to those who are considering to? Can't give advice. That would take way too much time. But I do think, I think that a lot of anarchists should be making TikToks and YouTubes and Instagrams and all of that and spreading anarchist thought far and wide and libertarian socialist ideology far and wide. That should absolutely be done. We're way behind on that. The MLs have absolutely took over TikTok, for example. It's just infested with authoritarian leftists at this point. So I absolutely do think that. If you think that, don't just make it another one which just says all the same stuff again, but like, if you have like a special interest or some kind of, thing you think you can introduce, then absolutely you should make a channel and like introduce those ideas to new audiences. Yeah, people are still talking shit about Parenti. Yeah, not a big fan of Parenti, but I'm also not going to spend a whole lot of time shitting on Parenti. I don't think it's in good taste to spend that much time shitting on somebody who just died. Especially not somebody who's, if it were like a fascist, we'd spend the whole stream shitting on them. But, I think that he thought he, in his mind, had good intentions, but he was deceitful in service of those interests. We are Michael Parenti. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I've already talked about Rojava in the first half of the live stream. So if you want to go hear my opinions on that. I don't mean this live stream. If you're listening to this one afterwards or right now, there was a previous live stream I started where my router was really messed up and I was getting terrible internet quality, and so everything was like choppy and everything. So I actually don't know how intact that stream is going to be because I haven't looked at it, but it was lagging really bad. Our brain hurts a lot. Donated 50. Oh, is that Mexican dollars? Yeah, Mexican dollars. They said, "What are your thoughts on Gramsci?" I actually like Gramsci for the most part. Rather, I think that Gramsci provided a lot of useful theoretical constructs and a lot of good insights that made their way into the broader leftist imagination and hegemony and the establishing cultural theories of cultural hegemony and so on. I think that it was interesting because he was a council communist and he was involved in praxis. And yeah, no, he had a generally more libertarian socialist approach. However, he was still kind of like, we have to build the party and stuff like that. So I definitely have some qualms, but I think Gramsci was one of the better Marxists for sure. Vlad says Michael Parenti was based. He was not deceitful. You just disagreed with him. No, when I say he's deceitful, I'm not talking about the part where he redefined socialism. That's deceitful in my opinion. But no, I mean, that's like, I would say that's like a theoretical dispute about the definition of socialism. No, like in red shirts and black shirts, he just lies about anarchists. He spreads Soviet Union propaganda about the anarchists that they literally just made up to excuse suppressing them. Both domestically and abroad. The things that he says in that book are a lot of them are just flat out fabrications. They're not fabrications of his own. He was just a lazy historian and just regurgitated anything the Bolsheviks said. So he was a bad historian, and that's what led to him being deceitful. The platform says, I've encountered this strange quote-unquote syndicalist that actually just glazes Mussolini called the Jailino. His ridiculousness inspired me to write a proper material critique of fascism and syndicalism. Yeah, no, I mean, just recall syndicalism, not anarcho-syndicalism, but just bare syndicalism, like national syndicalism, was part of the coalition that built fascism. They didn't create fascism, but they were part of that coalition. So if you see somebody that just their bio just says syndicalist or national syndicalist, that person is like 1 inch away from being a fascist, like a true historical Italian fascist. So yeah, you're right to critique them. Just don't make the mistake of thinking just syndicalist means anarcho-syndicalist. Chaos Playground asks a pretty similar question to a minute ago. Anark, would you recommend getting into content creation? Yes. And if so, how would one do that? That's too much detail for me to tell you the answer to that. The first thing you do is you make the account. I'll tell you step number 1. Think of a name, think of some good branding, make an account. And then after you've made an account, you put one step in front of the other. So, not to be dismissive here, I think it's a good idea, but also there's a lot of detail to how to be a content creator, and it's something you're really mostly just going to learn by doing it. So, you create the channel. You're going to need a camera. You're going to need a mic. Really, all you need is a mic. More than anything, just a mic. Get a nice quality mic. The mic is more important than your camera, but try to get a good camera if you can. Yeah. Jokey Pie says, how does one cope with the stress of feeling like they have a target on their back for who they are and what they believe? The reason I kind of laughed when I was first reading that is because I already knew my answer was going to be like, you have to commit yourself to a life of bravery, recognizing that you might have to sacrifice for your ideals, and immediately realized that's probably not a very reassuring answer, but it is what I believe. And that is, if you are going to commit yourself to revolutionary ideals, you have to recognize that your enemy is going to try to stop you. Like, especially the more effective you are going to be countervailed more and more. And you have to accept from the beginning that they may one day try to kill you, or that you may die in the struggle. And you have to like make peace with that ahead of time. Don't rush into it. There's do not meat grinder yourself, please. Please, I'm begging you. But also, you cannot live being afraid of death and repercussions. You have to live bravely, live by your principles, recognizing that your impact will live past you. And that's a hard thing to accept, but you really do have to accept it. You have to accept it ahead of time. So that's my opinion. You could watch my video Hope. I think that kind of gives some of my own personal motivational aspects, like kind of what motivates me. You could watch the last two videos I did, or the videos that were about existentialism or absurdist existentialism and stoicism. I think those offer some good lessons as well. But yeah, no, you just have to keep your mind focused upon the task. Like, I just got to say, if all you are is a person with an opinion talking online, you are the least at risk. The people who are most at risk are the ones who are on the ground doing the thing. The people who are visible, the people who are acting, those people are the ones that are most at risk. So if all you're doing is talking online, you really don't have much to worry about, to be honest. I mean, maybe something could happen, but nothing really big. But you have to practice bravery. You have to work through your fear. You have to feel the fear and move forward. Move forward while experiencing fear. I wish I had a better piece of advice, but you know, life's hard sometimes. Hyper Anamoya says, revolutionary syndicalist here, promise we're not all authoritarian. See, I wonder what that means for you, though, because like, if you mean like revolutionary anarcho-syndicalist, but do you mean just like, you just believe in building a bunch of trade unions? Is that like the idea? You just believe trade unionism is the revolutionary approach? Or like clarify what you just mean by syndicalism, because syndicalism by itself really just means union construction, and then has an implication toward trade union construction. Revolutionary syndicalism just means revolutionary trade unionism, basically. And then revolutionary anarcho-syndicalism is you're building horizontal federations of unions. So or as we've talked about before, you're trying to engage in some amount of social insertion, but that would be more like a speciesismo. So kind of, yeah, well, this person said Amagi is kind of what I was thinking. They're like, you know, all hail to labor unions, but fuck self-management. That's kind of the vibe I would get out of just revolutionary syndicalism without the anarcho part. But yeah. Vlad, I want to give you respect for at least agreeing that Kronstadt was not good. I mean, damn, it's rare how many authoritarian leftists will ever admit that it was a bad thing. I actually appreciate you saying that. But yeah. Moko Kopi, I think that they are kidding, yes. Poor Boy's Soul says, do you have any knowledge on disabled praxis? Well, that is extremely diverse. What every disabled person needs is going to differ. So I would say probably one of the best things to do insofar as like disability justice goes is developing mutual aid networks. And the more robust those mutual aid networks are, the better you're going to be able to serve people's disability needs. but it's very difficult to develop like a one-size-fits-all solution for disability. Socialist Sociopath says, which theory of ethics do you think is most compatible with anarchism? Also, what do you think of Marx's critique that any theory that exists today is influenced by capital and so is incomplete? So the first one, I will say, I think consequentialism is the most compatible with anarchism, but numerous anarchists have taken more of a virtue ethic approach. I personally think virtue ethics have a lot to teach us, but I'm more of a consequentialist. I'm a consequentialist at base. And I think very, very few anarchists are deontologists. Almost none are deontologists. But I'm sure some are. Probably Tolstoy, I guess, maybe would be a deontologist. But yeah, very rare to see deontologist ethics in anarchism. Mostly it's just consequentialism. Let's see. Oh, the second thing. What do you think of Marx's critique that any theory that exists today is influenced by capital and so is incomplete? I think it's a lazy critique, kind of. It's true, but it's also kind of dismissive in a sense. I mean, obviously, every theory is incomplete. You know, that's just the nature of trying to understand and model the universe. And it's obviously the case that any theory developed under capitalism is going to be influenced by capitalism. There's just no doubt about that. But I think the idea of kind of a lot of people are using that critique as a thought terminating cliche. It prevents them from thinking more deeply about the subject and trying to untangle what the actual capitalist influences are, rather than most people just use that kind of like a bludgeon that they use to discard other people's analyses to say that it's poisoned by capitalism and so on and so on. I think it's true that it is in fact, but I don't think it's maybe as extensive as many people portray it as being when they use that argument. Or rather, it's variable. Sometimes it's very extensive and sometimes it's not. You know, obviously there's a bunch of ideology where capitalism has utterly poisoned that ideology. But I also see it being used often on the left just to kind of shut down other people's perspectives and to promote a sort of theoretical doomerism. Mr. Poss says, why do you think that is in regards to deontology? Because deontology like presumes an ethical set of rules which precede the material factors. Like, or you have to argue that somehow they like, yeah, it's just really hard to argue that the rules are the rules and circumstances don't matter. Like, that's very hard to justify in a world that is as complex as ours is. And I think that even like Kant fell victim to attempting to he used the categorical imperative, and the categorical imperative itself is a consequentialist argument. I think it's very difficult to develop a purely deontologist structure. You almost need some kind of like God or divine being to be the one that handed down the ethics to you to have a deontological ethical perspective. Dang, I'm seeing that my stream is like lagging like crazy. What's going on here? It says my connection is fine. Why am I getting such a... Okay, I'm going to delete. I'm going to get rid of this, get rid of this. This is annoying. Yeah, this sucks. What's happened to my streams? It's just like bombing for some reason. Okay, I'm going to start Xing stuff off. Dang. Well, now like I don't have anything left to X off. I have like barely anything to X off now. This is I don't know what's going on. This is definitely not on my side. This is on the ISP side. Oh, you can hear my mic though. You just can't. My video is lagging. Okay. Dang, this sucks. I'm seeing the video feed. It doesn't look good. It's all right. It's all right. Janarchy or Janarchy says compatibility of secular humanism and anarchism. I'm a secular humanist and anarchist. Most anarchists have historically been secular humanists, like back in the day. Only in the modern era, once we got kind of like this anti-humanism, which is usually very academic in nature, you'll notice that anti-humanism usually has very kind of abstract theoretical arguments. Only then did you see this sort of downtick of anarchists who are humanists, but secular humanism is sort of the default of anarchism in my experience. I'm so sad that my modem is doing this again. I thought that, I made a big sacrifice resetting it the last time. I didn't think it was going to happen again. No, nothing's overheating. My computer's doing fine. No problem on the computer side. It's got to be my connection. Yeah, it says that it's just not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. My computer's fine. It's barely even revving up. SNS donated $2 and said, it's scary how much the authoritarian left hates ethics. Yeah, I do think it is weird how much they do not want to have any discussion about ethics. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm fine if you, if what your argument is that, our political theory is not an ethical theory, it's a theory of change. That's fine. But then from there, you should be willing to have a talk about ethics. Like, we can still talk about ethics as a philosophical concept. Dang. My stream is real messed up. That's what everybody's talking about in chat. That's really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. I am on Ethernet. Yeah. No, this just has to be on the side of the ISP. This is definitely not on me. All right, I'm going to try to disconnect my internet and connect it real quick, and we're going to see what happens. If the stream disables, I'll start again, a third one for the day. Oh no, I don't want to. I don't want to. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't want to do it. I don't want to start a third one. It's really unfortunate. Sad about it. This one's going good. This one's going so good. Yeah, it's not getting better. Socialist Sociopath says, do you view speciesism as a hierarchy that anarchism seeks to abolish? Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. The mistreatment of other conscious animals on this planet is utterly revolting. Absolutely revolting. The way that humans treat the environment and treat other animals as like completely lesser is awful. And it is absolutely a hierarchical power structure, and it does have to be dismantled. Pretty much my only criticisms are just criticisms of methodology. As far as like the ethics of veganism, I pretty much agree with the ethics of veganism, but I don't think that a lot of vegans are only concerned with the boycott. And I just think that that's a very liberal praxis. I think that the meat boycott is a liberal praxis, in my opinion. Somebody said, no need for a second channel with 3 daily streams. Yeah, exactly. The Platform 763 nails it, says, I feel like most assumptions of Marxist-Leninism are actually just originating from Ferdinand de Lassalle. I mean, the state being class neutral, state backing for worker cooperatives, and state socialism more generally. Absolutely. As well as Louis Blanc. Blanc, I think, was also a huge influence on Leninism. It's basically like Blanc and Lassalle, which is interesting because Blanc and Lassalle were called out by Engels and, let's see, not Marx, but I think Engels, while he was still alive. So it just kind of demonstrates how far off base Lenin is in his citation of Marx and Engels. By the way, I did not say that vegans are liberals, but I said that the vegan obsession with just the meat boycott, that is a liberal approach to veganism. It's lifestyleism is all that is, right? You're not actually meaningfully impacting the social structure of speciesism when you boycott meat. All that does is mean that many of these same companies are just going to pump out like meat alternatives. And from what we see, there's really not like a drop in meat consumption either. So more farms are still being built and factory farming is still expanding. The liberal boycotting approach does not work. So, but I agree with vegan ethics more broadly. I think that they're basically right as far as like all of the ethical points that they make about the treatment of animals by humans. Well, the quality is not improving. Do I have to reset the damn thing again? I don't want to. Can I turn something off? Damn. Unfortunately, I don't think that disconnecting and connecting my internet is really going to help. I probably do need to reset the damn thing. Reset the modem, probably. Let's see what happens. Okay. Did it work? Did it work? Looks like the stream's still up. Okay. What's going on here? We got it? Oh, I don't know. We'll see. Is it getting caught up? Doesn't look like it changed. Doesn't look much different. Elfie says, what about orgs like Food Not Bombs being vegan? I mean, that seems like good praxis. That's actually like meaningfully changing the social structures around consumption. Dang. Yeah, no, that didn't change my connection. Sad story. Sad story. Wow. Well, I mean, I don't want to end the stream for today. Lag's worse now. Damn. All right. Dang. I had to get everybody from one stream to the next once, and now I'm going to have to do it again. KD11, read Social Anarchism and Organization by Farge. I mean, I guess I'm going to have to reset the thing again because this is just looks terrible. Damn, it's lagging so bad. Okay, everybody, we're going to try it a third time. This is so annoying. All right, well. All right, I'm going to do this one more time. Next time this happens on stream, the next stream, I am not going to do it again. We'll just end if it starts lagging like this again. I'm going to reset my modem, and then we are going to start another stream after this, and I hope y'all transition over to the third live stream that I have to start today.